Well, today we are going to talk about Thanksgiving, folks, because Thanksgiving is coming up. And I was thinking that we might spend a moment or two reflecting upon this very important part of our faith, Thanksgiving, and how we can understand it better, and not only understand it, but this is the thing, feel it, okay? Feel it better. We understand it, perhaps, but we don't really feel it. It's kind of the difference between saying thank you for the canned mackerel and saying thank you for the candy, you say. We may say thank you for both of those, but one of them we really feel thankful. So I've selected this passage from John today that we heard read earlier. The passage is a passage in which Jesus is at the tomb of his dear friend Lazarus, who has died, of course, and people are kind of blaming Jesus for not being there. He'd been there, he wouldn't have died, and so forth and so on. And he's asked him to open the tomb so he can call Lazarus back to life. And the thing that we must think about is what he says at that point. And the reason we must think about it when we're thinking about Thanksgiving is because we have to ask the question, what was Jesus thankful for? What was he thankful for? You look in the New Testament, you search here, you search there, you go all around different concordances and everything. When did Jesus give thanks? Well, there's three things he gave thanks for, we can remember. He gave thanks for the bread on the night he was betrayed. He gave thanks for the wine on the night he was betrayed. And he gave thanks for his disciples. Those were the three things we might remember if we thought about what Jesus gave thanks for. But this one here we tend to forget. This one here we tend not to remember. Man, I think we must, because it really lies at the heart of what Thanksgiving is all about. It simply says that Jesus looked up to heaven and he says, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. Father, I know you always hear me, but I say this for the benefit of everyone here. Father, I thank you that you have heard me. That's the fourth and probably the most wonderful thing that Jesus says when it comes to saying what he is thankful for. That the Father has heard him. Now, something everybody knows. God hears our prayers. We all say that. Yes, God hears our prayers. And most Christians everywhere in the world says, oh yeah, God hears our prayers. We're aware of that. We know that God hears our prayers, and that's why we pray, because God hears our prayers, and that's what it's all about. But I want to get at the heart of that. I want to get a little deeper than just saying, oh yeah, God hears our prayers, because that kind of sounds like we're taking it for granted. I want us to get deep into it. I want us to feel what it's like to know that God hears our prayers. Because if you feel that, if you sense it, if you really, really deeply know it, it changes your life. Let me tell you, it changes your life. Well, I'll tell you a little event here that happened in my life about 45 years ago now. I was a little bit younger in those days. And at that time I was a youth minister in a big church there in Austin, Texas. And I had been invited to apply for a special youth retreat that was being held out in Oregon near Mount Hood, a place called Badger Wilderness. And the idea was we were going to go out there for training in how to help youth build community in the Christian sense. And I thought that sounded like a fun and wonderful thing to do as a young man. And so they had an application for me to fill out. So I filled out the application. And I was going down the questions. Everything was going fine until I ran across the question. It says, what experience have you had hiking and camping in rugged areas? Well, I was a Boy Scout, kind of. And I did hike once in the hill country. So I put in there that I was an advanced Boy Scout and had done rugged hiking in the hill country. And so I was accepted to the workshop, and they invited me out. The church raised funds, sent me out there. And what a beautiful, beautiful place that Badger Wilderness is, in case you've never been there. All these tall mountains, Mount Hood in the distance with the snow cap on it, all the other mountains with a little snow coming this way and that way, surrounded by these pine trees, beautiful fresh air, waterfalls and rushing rivers. Oh, having come from hot, humid Texas, it was paradise. I just loved it. I said, I love being here. And so we started the camp. The kids had not arrived yet. They wanted to do training for us. And unfortunately, I had not read the brochure too closely. We were going to do survival training. We were going to take 10 kids out into the wilderness and survive for 5 days. I didn't know about that part. I thought it was going to be sitting around a campfire saying kumbaya, it's all right. What is this survival? And they gave us about a 5 or 6 day week, a 5 or 6 day training course on how to survive and how to understand this and what to do if that happens. I was kind of flabbergasted by it all, but I learned as best I could because I knew I was going to start taking these kids out into the wilderness and to survive out there. And so the day came when the kids came, and we had a few days together to get to know each other, and we divided up into groups of 10, and we prepared ourselves to go out into the wilderness. And the whole idea was to learn how to lean on each other, how to build a community out there, how to struggle together, and it could be a great thing, really. And so we were all happy and excited about it, so off we went into the wilderness. But before we left, the directors of the camp brought all of us leaders over and said, now we have an emergency communication system. I said, thank God they have that. So they gave each one of us a little walkie-talkie kind of radio. And they said, put it on channel 4. Always channel 4. And anytime you need something, call us. And every day you should check in to let us know that you're on schedule and that everything's going accordingly. And they called the base camp, of course, this was a Christian base camp, and they called the base camp Eyes Above. And they called us, my group, Sparrow 1. And so we practiced. We punched the button and said, eyes above, come in, eyes above. And then they came in saying, Sparrow 1, this is eyes above, go ahead. Oh, it was so much fun. It reminded me of the war movies and when they were calling each other on the radio. I was so excited about that. I'm glad we had it. And they gave it to us on a kind of a chain thing that went around the neck like a cross, and we just kept it right here on us all the time. Off we went into the wilderness. It was a beautiful, beautiful hike. Oh, the weather was so cool and nice, and the root streams were so pure and wonderful. And we had a great time the first day. We made our camp. We got there on schedule. I remember calling in to the base camp, and we shared the fact that we were okay. And then I remember saying, good night, eyes above. I was excited about that. So then we went on and came to the third day. That was the nightmare day. That was the experience I want to share with you. Our map indicated that we were supposed to go in a certain direction, and when we came about a mile and a half from where our camp was, we were to cross a stream. And then immediately after we crossed the stream, we were to turn due north. And we had compasses. It was not a big problem. So we walked on, and we came to the point where it had been about a mile and a half, and there was nothing there. We did not see a stream anywhere, and just nothing but a dry creek bed. So I said, well, let's go on. Let's see what's on the other side over here. There was a dense forest over there. So we got into that forest, and we kept walking, and the ground got more rugged, and the slippery stones, and it began to be, I thought, boy, this is really a bad trail to get us into. And so we got on a little bit further, and there was a ridge line, and we kind of had to walk down the side of it because there was this deep ravine. And as we walked a little bit further, one of our team slipped on this stone and went crashing down into this deep kind of ravine. And he was crying out in pain, and we all, oh, what can we do? So we slowly worked our way down into the ravine, and after a little bit of investigation, we realized that he had broken his leg. And he had a severe cut in his arm. Thankfully, some of our members, some of our team knew about how to do some first aid. We knew about splints. We knew a little of this and that. And together we worked to get to the point where we could relieve his pain a little bit. We had some first aid kit and some stuff in it. And we bandaged up his arm. And things were looking okay for him, except we had this camper now that had a broken leg. And we're 3 days deep into the wilderness. What are we going to do? So I decided right then and there I'd get my radio out and say, press the channel 4 button. Oh, eyes above, this is Sparrow 1, we have an emergency. Nothing. I said it again, eyes above, this is Sparrow 1, we have an emergency, come in please. Nothing. So I told the group, I said, y'all stay down here. I'm going to climb on up to the top of the Revenge. Maybe I can get a better reception. I went up there, and the reception was nothing at all. There was no sound coming back through. And it was getting later on in the afternoon, so I had no choice but to tell the young people together. I said, let's all make camp here in the bottom of this ravine, because there's no reason for us to all climb back up to the top. So we made camp down there. We set up our tents. We got fire. We got food. Night was falling. I tried again. Eyes above, come in. Eyes above, come in. No response. And they knew we were having trouble communicating. But I tried to say, I'm sure they'll get back to us soon. And so we got ready to go to bed for the night, but we could smell, you could smell it. When you go out there, you know what I'm talking about. We could smell rain coming. You could smell it. You could see the dark clouds back that way. So I had told them, I said, it might be rainy a little bit tonight, so let's prepare. Let's peg the tents down double pegs, and let's take some little moats and dig around the tents so that if there's any water, it'll run off down the ravine. And so we set it up like that, and we were dead tired, and everybody was really ready to go to sleep, so we all went to sleep. And about the middle of the night, the rain started, and we could hear it, and it was kind of comforting. You know, you're in the tent, a little rain falling, it was nice. I went back to sleep. Then all of a sudden I heard a sound. Very much like the Tomebamba River when it gets full. What is that? So I took my flashlight and I went outside, and I could see that the water was beginning to fill up our campsite on the right and the left, and I could hear that rumbling up here. And I had been trained in that survival school, and I knew enough that a flash flood was coming. And silly enough, we had camped in the middle of a ravine. Water's coming, big time. So I screamed, everybody out, run, up the hill, let's go, don't get anything, don't stop, don't pass go, don't do nothing. Let's get out of these tents up onto the top. And everybody got out and scrambled, and two of the bigger guys helped me carry up the guy with the broken leg all the way up the hill, and the rain was beginning to get harder and harder and harder, and the night continued to get darker, but we huddled together up there at the top until dawn. And when dawn came, we looked down and we saw a river where we used to camp. Just like the Tomebamba River, but bigger and muddier and angry. And all of our tents were gone. All of our food was gone. Everything was gone. And there we were in our underwear. It was the middle of July, you know. What are you going to do? And there we sat. And it's like nothing. We got nothing out here. And of course, the thing that really cheered me, I still had that radio around my neck, and I looked at it immediately, and the battery was still good. So I punched that channel 4 again. Eyes above, come in. We have severe emergency. Flash flood, eyes above. Nothing. So we tried 3 or 4 or 5 more times, and finally I told him, I said, we got to quit because we have to save this battery. I said, we're going to crawl up to the top of this higher ridge over here, because maybe I can get up high enough, maybe that wave length will go on to the base camp. So we climbed all the way on up to the higher ridge, and we got up there and sat down, and I tried again, and there was nothing there. That was one of the worst days and the worst nights I ever spent in my life. Sitting up there on the top of that ridge now with the sun burning us all to pieces. No food, no water, 10 young people and me, 3 days into the deepest, darkest wilderness we'd ever been into. What are we going to do? The only thing we can do is to go back 3 days, try to find base camp, try to carry our guy with a broken leg. No map, of course. Map's totally gone. And there were turns this way and there were turns that way. What if we get caught in the Box Canyon? What's going to happen? You know, it began to occur to me, this is a life and death situation. What are we going to do? I never felt more lost in my life since that day. I felt so lost and alone. I'm out here with these lives that are depending upon me, and I have no options. I don't have anything I can do. I don't know what I'm going to do. So finally, I decided that we really have to try to do it. Got no food, no water, but maybe we'll get guided back to the base camp by the Lord somehow. We'll get our way back. So I told him, I said, the next morning, we're going to suck it up. We're going to get out of here, and we're going to work our way back to the base camp until somebody knows we're gone. They all said, yeah, well, that's what we got to do. So that morning we got up and we tried to gather up our strength and we tried to gather up our spirit that we would get on the road and we would go back to the base camp. And we had a prayer. We had been praying, but we all sat together and we hold hands real tight. And we talked about in our prayer how we hoped that God would be with us and that God would help us get down those steep paths and get around the corners we need to go around. And we talked about how God would help us get back to the base camp, and that we prayed that He would save us from the misery that we were in. And we just prayed that, and we prayed that, and we prayed it. I'd never seen young people pray like that. Absolutely never seen young people pray like that. But it was a serious prayer. This was no Sunday picnic prayer. No, this was a real prayer. And just as we stood up and said amen, crackle, 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 crackle my radio, and all of a sudden it came in. Sparrow 1, this is eyes above. Sparrow 1, this is eyes above. Oh, I was like shocked beyond shocked. I could not imagine. It was like, did I hear that right? Did I really hear it? And sure enough, it came through again. Sparrow 1, this is eyes above. Where are you? Boy, I grabbed that radio as quick as I could, and I said, don't go away. Please, don't go away. I forgot to say, this is Sparrow 1. I didn't even say that. I said, please don't go away. And I just kept saying that. I just kept saying it over and over. Please don't go away. They probably wondered, what the heck's wrong with this guy? Then I told them the whole story about how we'd had a flash flood. We got a kid with a broken leg, and we're just sitting out here with our underwear with nothing going on. But the great feeling I have never forgotten for the last 45 years. That feeling of knowing somebody has heard us. You see? Somebody has heard us. Of course, yes, we were saved. Medevac helicopter came out. We were taken back to base camp. We became very close. We really understood what Christian community was all about. We understood what it was all about, the joy of being saved. We'd felt all that. But the real joy we felt, every one of us, was that moment when that radio crackled and we realized somebody is listening to our cry. Oh, I still think about it even to this day. When I think about it to this moment, the heart beats faster to know that God is there listening to our cry. Oh, it's a joy beyond all joys. It's a thanksgiving beyond all thanksgiving. It is something that you just never forget that feeling. And this is what we must remember to feel in the Christian church, because this is the gospel. This is the message. God will hear our prayer. We have an eternal base camp. And though we may not get through the first time, may not get through the second or the third or the fifth or the sixth time, base camp will answer. Amen. That's what I'm saying. You've got to feel that confidence in life. You got to feel that no matter what happens, God is listening. Whether it's the good result you're hoping for or the sad result that you hoped did not happen, the results are not as important as knowing that for all eternity God is there and He hears your prayer and He will work it out in the way it needs to be worked out. I know that my God is with me, and I know He hears my prayer. And to me, that's the greatest thing in the world. And this is what I don't see in our Christian faith, in our Christian churches today. I don't see people who are totally convinced and who wake up every day with joy in their heart because they know the base camp is listening, because they know God hears their cry, because they know God will save them in whatever situation they find themselves in the way God intends to save them. God is with us. God hears our prayers. God is right there, and God will answer. That's a joy that all of us should have and never forget. And always when we come here to sing the hymns or to read the scriptures, we do it with that joy of knowing that God hears our prayers. So, there is that first part of thanksgiving. Remembering what it's like to know God is there. No matter what's going on in your life, no matter how much misery, difficulty, whatever else it is, God is there and He will answer your prayer. He will answer your prayer in a way that will help you and save you. Now, there's a second part to this though, and I want to emphasize that here today as well. If we say God hears us, And that's what we say. God hears our prayers. What's the logical conclusion of that? If you say God hears us, what is the logical other side of that? If God hears us, we can hear God. Huh? What's the sense of a one-way communication? No sense in a one-way communication. If we can hear God, God can hear us, we can hear God speaking to us. It's a double-sided thanksgiving. To know not only that God hears our prayer, but that God speaks to us an answer to our prayers. That's the other side of this. And that's the other side that we also need to feel and be thankful for. What I'm doing here today is just trying to describe the feeling. That's all I'm trying to do. Because you already know the truth that God hears our prayers and that God answers our prayers. You already know that. But I'm trying to recapture the excitement and the feeling and the joy of knowing that He not only hears our prayers, but He speaks to us in a language we can understand. Had another experience on my trip which I'd like to share with you as a way of illustrating this joy. We went to a beautiful, beautiful place on the north coast of France, about 300 yards out into the ocean, called Mont Saint-Michel. Been there for over 1,000 years. It's this beautiful, fantasy-like, almost Disneyland-like castle that rises up from the ocean, built on a granite bluff in the ocean, out a ways. And you kind of just see this thing rise up on the horizon. Gorgeous, beautiful castle that stood there for 1,000 years. It was a fort originally to try to protect the French coast from the invasions of the English. And then it became a monastery. It became an abbey, and they built this beautiful cathedral up on top of it where they could worship God and meditate upon the word of the Lord in this beautiful sky-lit chapel. We went there to see that place because it's a world-famous place to see, and the beauty of it and the faith that you feel when you're there. It's like out on the ocean. It's like being out in a boat, but yet all the ocean and the waves and everything around it. It's not a reason to be afraid because you're in the castle. And as you're in the castle, you feel the strength of the presence of God there. So we went. And we had planned to stay inside the castle, and that's something most people don't do. Most people stay in a hotel 25, 30 miles away. But we had rented, there were some hotels inside the castle, and you could stay there. And the beautiful thing about staying there was you got to walk around at night when all the tourists had gone home. And there are millions of tourists there every day. So you could walk through the cobblestone streets and you could see the buildings and you could feel the presence of the peace there. And that's what I wanted to do, is I wanted to feel that peace. I wanted to feel that presence. And I knew with 100,000 tourists trying to get through, I wasn't going to feel no peace about nothing. So it was a beautiful experience in the sense that we were pulling our luggage up to where our hotel was on the top of the hill. It's on a mount. That's why they call it a mountain, mount. And our hotel was at the very top, so we pulled everything all the way up there. And we got to where our hotel was. I had my reservation in my hand, and here I behold a closed hotel. Totally closed. And there's not that many people in Mont Michel at that time. Here we are, nice little gas lights going on, and the hotel is completely closed, steel shutters down to the ground, no bell to ring, no nothing. And we spent 8.5 hours getting there. We're tired, we're hungry, and there's nobody in the hotel. I couldn't believe it. You know, as I told you, I love to plan things. This was not according to my plan. So I told Rebecca, you wait here with the bags. I'll go down that pathway and I'll see if I can find somebody and can ask them what's going on. Of course, she felt confident that I would go ask them. And of course, as I was taking off, I remembered I didn't speak French that well. And this was a French-speaking place, especially at this time of night. So off I went, but I had enough French to say what I needed to say. And I showed these French people my reservation, you know, and they were very rude to me. I could not believe that. Especially the one that had a hotel, because they could see I was not reserved at their hotel. And they basically kind of told me in French to get lost. I was like, well, that's not very nice. But I could understand they weren't going to help me at all. So I went on a little bit further, found a restaurant, went in there, asked one of the guys behind the cash register, and he was just as rude as a French person could be. No, no. I said, No, what is that? I didn't know what else to do. I said, this is horrible. I got nobody to help us. You know, who are you going to call? I don't know who to call. I don't even have a phone to call. So what am I going to do? So I went back up to the hotel where Rebecca was, past her, and I said, listen, I'm going to try my luck up the hill. Maybe I'll find somebody better up there. So I went up the hill, and there was a restaurant there that was kind of lit up, and people were all down in the bottom part of the restaurant having fun, eating food, and I was still hungry, you know, and they're all down there eating food. So I thought, well, at least I can go in here and ask somebody. So as I walked in, there was this young man coming up the stairs, and he was carrying a load of dishes, dirty dishes, in a bag, I mean, in a thing that was holding the dishes, and he was walking up, and he looked at me, and I looked at him. And so I said in my best French, Pouvez-vous m'aider? Mon hotel firm. He kind of looked at me like, okay, I think you're having trouble with your hotel, yeah. But he was nice. He was not like the other people. And he took my reservation and he looked at it and he started speaking this French. It was just really rapid French. And he was just going on and on but at least he was trying to help me. And that was great news, that he was trying to help me. And I could tell by his hand language that he was pointing to go back down the road, back down that road I had come from. And he kept saying, Hotel Pierre, Hotel Saint-Pierre. I said, aha. So I was so excited that I understood him, I forgot that I wasn't in Ecuador anymore. And so I said, Debo abajo? I didn't even think about it being in Spanish. And his eyes got real big, and he looked right at me, and he said, ¿Hablas español? I said, sí, hablas español. And it was an amazing thing. And he told me that he was from Cuba, that he was a waiter at this restaurant, and that Spanish was his natural language. And I say, vivo en Ecuador. And it was, we were becoming great friends. I could understand him, and he could understand me. It was not the language I had expected, but it was a language I could understand. And it was a great thing. He was able to share with me that the owners of that hotel owned 3 other hotels there, and in the off-season, which is where we were, they closed 2 of them, and they left 1 open, and that they would host me at their other hotel. Would have been nice if they would have told me that. But we went down to Hotel Saint-Pierre, and they recognized me and welcomed me, and things went better from there. But here's the point of this story. The joy I felt, the excitement I felt, to not only know someone was helping me, but to have enough understanding that I could understand what they were saying to me. That was the greatest moment, I think, on our whole trip. And I never would have imagined in 1,000 years that we would be saved because I learned a little Spanish in Ecuador. Unbelievable. But there it was. We communicated. And then at the last, after we'd finished talking to each other, we came up and we hugged each other with a good old South American hug. Mi amigo, we said. Gracias mucho. So, the point of this little story is to try to remind us all that God does speak to us. God does answer us. And we know enough about the language of God to understand what God is saying to us. We know enough about God to understand what God is truly saying to us. We know that God is love. We know that God wants the best for us. Not what we want necessarily, but God wants the best for us. We know this language of God just about as much as I know Spanish. We know this language of God, and we can understand when God is speaking to us about our life and what we must be doing and how we must be doing it, and that our life needs to be about self-sacrificing love, self-giving love, as was the life of Jesus. We know these things. We know enough about God to know what His response to us will be. We know enough about God to understand how He will save us, how He will encourage us, and how He will guide us. And the great news is we will be able to understand it and be comforted by it, encouraged by it, changed by it, led by it. And so we have this great confidence. Not only that God hears our prayers, but that if we will listen with the ears of faith, if we will listen with the ears that understand God's language, we will hear from God the word God wants us to hear, and we will understand it, and we will be made confident and renewed by it. What a joy that is! What a wonderfulness that is! To know that in this life, and this life is not easy. People want to say, oh, the world's a wonderful place. The world is not a wonderful place. It is filled with death, destructions, accidents, miseries, all kinds of problems you could not even begin to imagine. This is a hard place to live. Always has been and always will be. But let me tell you, what we have in our hearts is a faith that says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. And you know why? Because God hears me. God answers me. And whatever else may come my way, doesn't make a bit of difference. God hears me, and God will save me. That's all I need to know. And I can walk with confidence. I can walk with faith in this world. I can walk with joy in this world. I can walk with peace in this world because I know these truths. And that's all I'm trying to say today. I hope our Christian folks, all of us who are here present today, will show a little bit more of this joy of knowing that God hears your prayers. And a little bit more of this peace of knowing that God will answer you in the way God knows best. I just want to see more of that. That's all I want to see. Because then I will know we have a people that will not walk in fear, nor will they walk in selfishness, but they will walk in faith and in selflessness. So, to conclude today's message, one more little story that happened when I was pastor of a large church there in Houston. We had a mayor at that time known as Kathy Whitmire. And Kathy was a member of our congregation. And she and I talked a lot, and we got to know each other quite well. She was the first woman mayor of Houston ever elected. And so there came a time when there was going to be an appreciation event for the police and for the firemen and for the first responders, the EMS people. And we were going to have an appreciation gala event, and she was going to speak there. And then she said that for some reason, I don't know why, but she felt like I had some energy and some ability to inspire. And so she said, how about you speak a short spiritual message to all of these policemen and firemen and EMS people. So I said, fine, I will do that. So the night came, we had the event, and she spoke, and I got up to speak, and I said what I wanted to say, because I had experienced firsthand when I was in seminary. We had to ride in the back seats of police cars to see what they went through at night. And we had to sit in the fire stations and see the tension and the anxiety they suffered every night of their lives. I knew what these men and women had sacrificed, so I was able to speak to that. But what I was inspired to say at the last is something that has stayed with me ever since. Not just about that particular setting, not just about those people that were there. It came to me to say to them simply this at the end. I said to them, thanks for being there, and thanks for responding. That's the best I could think of. To give them our thanks for being there when we need them, and to respond to our need when we need them. And it occurred to me, that's why it stayed with me ever since, that that's what we need to say to God this Thanksgiving. Not just thanks for the candy, thanks for all the nice things that we have. No. What we need to say to God this Thanksgiving, as in any Thanksgiving, is we need to say to God, thanks for being there, and thanks for responding. Just as Jesus said when he stood at the tomb of his dear friend, Father, I thank you that you have heard my prayer. Amen.